What is going on, everybody? It is Wednesday night. It is officially draft season as well. I'm working on changing some things. I have my backdrop here again, finally. I'm moving some stuff around. So thank you for being patient while I get everything set up. I figured we'd start getting into some mock draft stuff, start talking a little bit about what's going to happen with these picks coming up, what's going to happen with the 49ers during this draft process. And I figured, let's just dive right into it. So I published a mock for Niners Nation that went out today. That's what I wanted to start with talking about because, to be honest with you guys, I felt really good about it. And as somebody who does a lot of mock drafts, I can tell you there are a ton that I have that I end up throwing into the trash and discarding, and I never post. This one I felt really good about. So I apologize if you already read it and the suspense isn't there, but I will go a little bit more in depth about why I liked each of those picks and why I think that they're good for the 49ers and why I think it would just be a great situation all around. So let's get into the spirit. Let's get excited. It is mock draft season. I want to hear what you guys think about the picks. If you think it's a complete L on my part or if you like it, let me know in the chat. We'll talk about it a bit, and I figure we have about a month or so until the draft gets here, so we're going to do some that are live mock drafts as well. We'll do some stuff playing around with the mock draft simulators, and I'll do some stuff that will involve you guys as well. But for today, this one is just going to be the mock that I did that didn't involve any trades. I stayed where the picks are currently slated to be picked as of right now. So I wanted to just keep it simple for the first one. We'll get more into trading because I'm a big trade back guy. I think trading back for value is a great move in a draft as deep as this one. But for this one, just throwing it out there again, that it's going to be strictly where the Niners are slated to pick right now. So let's jump into it. The first pick that the Niners have currently on their board right now is pick 61 at the back end of the second round. So I'm sitting there and I'm, going through where the needs might be, where the luxury picks might be. Do I go best player available? Do I address an area of need? And for me, I think you can kind of do a little bit of both by taking an edge guy there. Full disclosure as well. So what I did for this mock was I used the PFF mock simulator. If we're talking about the mock simulators that are out there, I find theirs to be the most historically accurate when you go through these hundreds and hundreds of mock drafts and you see where guys actually end up getting picked. No disrespect to PFN. I know a lot of people use theirs. I unfortunately, I saw picks with Sky Moore going in the fourth round, and the guy's going to be a borderline first round talent. I just find the PFF mock to be a little bit more accurate based on where guys are probably going to go. So PFF mock was the tool, and there were no trades. So again, I'm circling back, thinking edge guy. Who fits this mold for the 49ers? So this is the pick that I ended up going with. I went with Josh Paschal, edge out of Kentucky. If you guys aren't familiar with Josh, he's 6'3", 278 pounds, tremendous physical ability, very strong at the point of attack. I actually think he was a better run defender than he was a pass rusher, but I do think that's a trait that's extremely valuable, especially if you're looking to make an impact from day one in the NFL. And if you're looking to get on the field during your rookie season, you have to be able to hold your own on base downs. And I think Paschal could not only hold his own, he was a force in the run game. I'll get more into some film breakdowns and some stuff later into this draft process, but there was a play in particular that I want you guys to put in the back pocket and remember that I'll post later on, where Paschal literally picked up a tight end from Georgia when he was engaged in a block with him and tackled James. I think it was James Cook. I apologize if it wasn't one of the other running backs, but he tackled the running back from Georgia by literally getting under the pads and lifting this guy up off the ground and into his own player. So for me, he's a guy, again, that has that physical ability, really strong at the point of attack, good get off. I think that he's somebody that could develop into a just not only impact starter, but somebody who's a borderline Pro Bowl talent. I think when you have that innate physical ability and you have that discipline in the run game, if you have some time to develop with Kosaric, I think that that's something that will bring out all those physical traits and manifest into a player that can really maximize their pass rushing ability. To be honest with you, there are a lot of players who I like who I don't think will be on the board for the 49ers that will probably go early in the second round. So I understand if people haven't really seen Paschal or they're not a big fan of his. I'm personally just going off of my own projection of what I think he could be and what he brings from day one. And so for me, I like him a lot. I think that he's somebody, again, you get that bona fide 3-down guy that can kind of develop over time. You have a deep rotation with Samson Ebukam on the edge too. You know, they just brought back Hyder. You have a Menahue. There's not the pressure to come in and contribute from day one. But again, I'm banking on the physical tools and being able to mold him into a guy that can be that perennial 3-down lineman on the opposite side of Nick Bosa. So that's my pick at 61. I know a lot of people probably may not be thrilled with that, or they may not be on board with it, just from what I'm seeing in the chat a little bit. That seems to be kind of the consensus right now. Hendricks doesn't really like it. Idris doesn't really like it. I'm telling you guys, I think that he's there. I think he's a guy that would be a great fit if he was there. I think he could be there at 61. I agree that I don't think that the bag of pass rushing moves is necessarily there yet, but I do think that that's something that can be developed over time. And I think the 49ers have the luxury of not needing him to come in right away and have that deep bag of moves. I think they have the luxury of having that deep rotation and not being overly reliant on that. So, yeah, Dawson will tell you, there's a couple plays in that Kentucky LSU game where he's running stunts to the inside and he is just blowing up the interior of that offensive line. There's another play where he frees up a sack for another one of his teammates on the defensive line because he commands 3 LSU offensive linemen being devoted to try to block him on this play. He's a freak to me, man, in the best way possible. I would be thrilled with it. So, again, it all comes down to who's left on the board. If there's still a guy there that has the athletic traits to be just a pass rush specialist, like I see Idris talking about a wide 9 guy, like, hey, I really like guys like D'Angelo Malone that might be available in the 3rd round. There's, you know, I'm not the biggest Nick Benito guy, but I know a lot of people really like him as well. So there are options for that. I just like the idea of getting somebody who could be a bona fide 3-down, you know, perennial starter on the opposite side of Bosa. And I'm just overly confident in what Chris Kocera can do with these guys. But I've just seen too many instances where he maximizes guys' abilities and you're able to see these guys take these huge leaps forward. So I'm willing to take the athletic player with the high floor in the run game and bank on Kocera developing him into a full-time player. So again, I understand that may not be the most popular pick, but I think my next pick will alleviate a lot of concerns for anybody who didn't like Edge or didn't like the Paschal pick, because my pick in round 3, the 49ers' second pick on their draft slate right now currently, at 93, I took Nick Cross, safety out of Maryland. This guy is incredible. He is somebody who has insane closing speed, just ridiculous open field ability and range, the ability to get out in space, diagnose plays, great instincts around the ball, has had multiple interceptions in 2 of his 3 seasons. He's recorded interceptions in each of his seasons, and he looked really good in a couple of big-time Big Ten games, especially that game against Michigan State. So, to be honest with you, I was abiding by the simulator, and I've seen him in this simulator for the most part going anywhere from the low 80s to the mid-90s. I would be shocked if Nick Cross is actually there at 93 when the Niners pick. I would be okay if the 49ers took Nick Cross at 61. And to be honest with you, I kind of toyed with that idea. I've done a couple mocks where I took him at 61 because I think that he is absolutely phenomenal. I think he's somebody that could come in and start. You get younger on that back end of the safety. You give Jimmy Ward a legitimate running mate to pair with on that back end. Cross ran in the 4.3s during the combine, looked absolutely tremendous during positional drills. And again, I think just getting younger at the position, getting a bona fide playmaker who can operate in space in the modern NFL and handle those big open areas that you're going to need to in this defense, the ability to drop, potentially have Jimmy Ward drop into the line of scrimmage, line up in the slot. You can still leave Nick Cross as the single deep high safety, and he has the range and the instincts to play that. So again, if he's there at 93, I am sprinting to the podium if I am the 49ers brass. Yes, he absolutely can play single high. I think he has the range to do it all. I think he's going to end up being one of these guys where the mock drafts and the fan consensus is a little bit behind where the teams might be on him right now. And I think that his showing at the combine just skyrocketed his stock. So again, he's a guy, if the Niners took it 61, I wouldn't fault them at all. I think he'd be a phenomenal fit, and I think that that'd be a more than reasonable spot to take him. So I did feel really good about that. And again, the straight line speed was there, but it pops. If you go and you watch the game tape there, it pops and it shows that he's a guy that will have it translate to the NFL game. And I think he's a guy who could come in from day one and start. So Nick Cross is the pick at in round 3. The 49ers also have a compensatory pick at the back end of round 3. So they are picking at 105, right? So you're still within the top 100 picks. You still have a tremendous amount of viable pieces in this draft. Like for me, the sweet spot of this draft is really like 70 to 120. Like that's where you really find the like meat and potatoes of this draft. And there's exceptions obviously on both sides of that, but there's a lot of really good talent in that area. Remember Jamal said this. Remember that second name because we're going to get to that in a second. But yes, Maryland, they did run really well at the combine. BSC thinks the NFL is higher on Nick Cross than the draft media because of his versatility. I completely agree. So back to 105, right? So the 49ers, in my eyes, you've addressed that edge spot. You've got that safety. At this point, where's a big need? For me, it's getting some insurance behind Alex Mack. It's getting a player who maybe doesn't have to start day one, but somebody who can be kind of that heir apparent. I think that center-quarterback relationship is extremely underrated at any level of football. And I think the investment you made in Trey Lance, it would be wise to get a guy to pair with that quarterback of the future for the next half a decade, maybe an entire decade. Like you get a guy to really be symbiotic in lockstep with Trey Lance going forward. So for me, I'm looking at interior offensive line. I'm looking at center specifically. So at 105, I went with Dohnovan West, center out of Arizona State. I was tremendously impressed with everything that I saw from Dohnovan West. There are two people whose opinions on the offensive line that I hold in the highest regard, who had nothing but good things to say about Dohnovan West before I was able to really deep dive on him, the player, and see what he's really about. 6'4", 300 pounds, moves really well in space, really agile, is really good at running both gap and zone concepts, has the ability to be a tremendous anchor in pass protection as well. He only allowed 4 pressures on 372 pass blocking snaps in 2021 for Arizona State. And so at 105, you're not only making an investment into the short term by getting a guy who can be, this, insurance piece and kind of depth on the interior should anything happen, but you're also getting the center of the future that has a year to learn behind a Pro Bowl level player like Alex Mack and absorb the playbook and the install and get comfortable playing. And on top of it, he's a really good player as is. So for me, this would be a home run. I do have to say the two guys that I spoke to about this, Brad Graham got on him before, I had a chance to watch him. Brad Graham, as you guys know, is the offensive line mastermind of 49ers Twitter. He is the guy that I lean on for my own insights, and he was very high on Dohnovan West. The other gentleman who I had the pleasure of speaking to, whose opinion I hold in the utmost regard, is Brandon Thorne. And if you guys aren't familiar with Brandon Thorne's work, he is just like, he's the godfather of offensive line evaluation and offensive line play, trench warfare, all that stuff. Brandon is just so good at what he does. If you haven't checked his work out, I would urge you to go subscribe, follow anything he's putting out. You're going to want to watch, especially if you're looking for some insight on how offensive line play is evaluated, how defensive line play is evaluated, all that stuff. He is just tremendous. And I had the ability to speak with Brandon for a little bit one-on-one at the scouting combine in Indianapolis, and he had the utmost praise for Dohnovan West. And he was a player that he really liked, especially in that third-round range. So for me, the 49ers end up here again. They get a player that has a very high ceiling moving forward, and if he needs to step in at any capacity during his rookie season, he has the ability to do that as well. And again, the issue for the 49ers for a couple years was the lack of consistent pass protection on the interior. And while I think that was shored up a little bit last season, West gives them a young player with a long-term outlook as somebody who profiles really well as a strong pass protector on the center of that offensive line. So again, another pick I would be absolutely thrilled with. But again, it all depends how the board falls. If he's another guy, if he's there at 93 and the Niners take him 12 picks earlier, I wouldn't fault them for that either. I think he's a really good player. And I think Arizona State has a few players that are really good. I think Kellen Diesch is a really interesting pick as well. I've toyed around a bit with taking tackles early, but on this one, I landed on a center. I grabbed the center of the future. Give him a year to learn behind Alex Mack. And then in 2023, for the foreseeable future, you have a dynamic young quarterback and center pairing to go ahead and spark this offense going forward. So moving on, the 49ers are now picking again at pick 134 in the 4th round. So I, at this point, feel like the majority of need has been met, right? So I'm going through this process and I'm banking on who's the best player available that I think would provide meaningful snaps for this team within the next 3 seasons. That's kind of my evaluation process. And again, we're all going to look at these players a little differently. We all might value them a little differently. I completely understand that. This is just where my own thought process went. So shout out to my guy, Jake Schultz. I know he's a big Bruins fan. He's definitely one of the first guys who put me onto this player. So at round 4, pick 134, I went with Otito Ogbonnia from UCLA, defensive interior. He's a guy who I think could step in immediately and give the 49ers some depth and insurance at that nose tackle position, where you do have Javon Kinlaw currently, but he's coming back from that knee injury. You have Hassan Ridgeway, but he's on a 1-year deal. Don't really know how that's going to project going forward. Ogbonnia gives you a player that can slide into that defensive interior rotation and just provide, again, a high floor and a solid output for the next couple seasons. And I think when you're picking in the 4th round, I'm past the point of looking for, home run, Pro Bowl level players at this point. I want guys who are going to get on the field and give me meaningful snaps. I think Ogbonnia could do that. 6'4", 320 pounds, a guy that fits in well with that rotation, can line up at the 0, 1, even 3 if you need to, any of those spots along the defensive interior. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. That's who I'd go with at 134. And again, I'm all for the 49ers carrying as many defensive linemen as possible and getting to camp and allowing it to sort itself out there. I don't think you can ever have too much of an investment in the trenches, and that's where I'm kind of at with this. This is pretty funny because moving on, the 49ers' next pick is round 5, pick 172. Again, I'm looking for guys that I think can get on the field and guys that I think can make an impact over the next couple seasons. So we're sitting here. We're at round 5. We've addressed the trenches on both sides. We've gotten an edge guy. We've gotten a safety. We've kind of covered the bases. So I'm coming back to who is the best player that I'm seeing left on the board when I'm picking here, and who do I think can come in and make that impact. So round 5, pick 172, I went with Hassan Haskins, running back out of Michigan. I was extremely impressed with what I saw from Haskins. He was a guy, to me, who looked really good running gap concept, and he looked really good running zone concepts. They ran a little bit more gap at Michigan than zone, but he did look good running both. To me, he does have the ability to generate explosive plays, but he also has the ability to just be a consistent runner. And in my eyes, somebody who can come in and within a year or two kind of spearhead that rushing attack. And I think even if he's just a complementary piece and you have him in a rotation with Eli Mitchell and Jeff Wilson, and we'll see what happens with, Trey Sermon and how that all plays out, I think that Haskins is a guy right here where the value is just too good to pass up. 6'1", 220 pounds. He's a guy that I just think has that north to south running ability, has the ability to run angry. BSE saying Jeff Wilson 2.0. Hey, I love that comparison. I'm a big fan of Jeff Wilson's, and I think Jeff Wilson's a heck of a running back. So I think Haskins kind of fits that same mold where he's a player that maybe isn't getting the love that he deserves. I think that he would be a fantastic fit. So sitting there at 172, the value's too good to pass up. Again, I'm not of this belief that the 49ers should just wait for undrafted free agents every year and fill out the running back room that way. I think you should identify guys that fit that mold. And I think Haskins is a guy who could ultimately be a lead back at a certain point. That's the evaluation I'm coming away with. Idris is saying Pierre Strong. I like Pierre Strong too, and he was honestly on the board, and it was kind of between those two. I just like Haskins. I'll be honest with you. Pierre Strong provides a tremendous amount of burst and one-cut ability. His top-end speed is insane. I think he ran the fastest 40, if I recall correctly, out of all the running backs in Indy. But For me, I was enamored with what I saw from Haskins. I liked him a lot. So that's who I go with. BSE says he does run a little high for being 6'1". He's a little worried about the fumbles and injuries. Hey, we'll see how it plays out. But again, for me, this is about, my feeling that he could be a guy that can do more than just be a specialist and, just be in there for aggressive outside zone calls or just be in there for power gap stuff. Like, I think he can do it all. That's why I like him there. So again, running back isn't going to excite a lot of people at this point, but it's important in this offense. And adding to an already pretty solid foundation in Eli Mitchell, Jeff Wilson. We don't really know what we have in Trey Sermon yet. Maybe you could add him to the mix too. But even just having a three-headed attack of Haskins and Mitchell and Jeff Wilson, like, to me, that's a rushing attack that you can win the NFC West with. That's a ground game that I think would stress out opposing NFL defenses. So that's where I went to. Remember this comment from earlier. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick because it's funny that Jamal mentioned it. I don't know if he's still in here right now, but let me see if I can find this. So Jamal said, I don't know what they put in the water at Maryland. Cross and Ogbonnia ran really well. I agree completely. So we're sitting here. We're at round 6, pick 187. Again, I'm looking for guys that you can find a versatile role with on this team. That's going to be the common theme, and I'm going to keep saying it so I can hammer that point home. I'm not looking to draft a guy who might not make the roster and might have all these crazy athletic traits but doesn't have the floor. I want somebody that I can envision a role for right away and somebody that I can envision getting on the field soon and getting on the field in a role that's already been proven successful for the 49ers. So we're sitting here. We're at round 6. We're at pick 187. I apologize if I mess up the pronunciation of this name because I admittedly had some issue with it, starting with it. Round 6, pick 187, I'm going Chigoziem Okonkwo from Maryland. Tight end. This guy, awesome. I don't know if Tony's in here. Tony was super high on him. Tony was one of the first people who told me to take a look at this guy. 6'2", 244 pounds, and he ran a 4.52 40-yard dash. This guy is he has really good athletic traits, has a 35.5-inch vertical as well. But what's really cool, and Tony kind of pointed this out, is Okonkwo has the ability to kind of play that Kyle Juszczyk, like fullback, offensive weapon, dynamic role that isn't really, defined, but is technically a fullback. He can line up in that role. He can play H-back. He can line up inline. He can line up kind of all over the place. And realistically, while I do think the 49ers are in a spot where they do need to improve the tight end depth behind George Kittle, hey, Ross Dwelley coming back. He's been around. He's a proven player. I get it. I'd like to see a little bit more athletic upside. Okonkwo gives them that in my eyes. And he also gives them a potential contingency plan for Kyle Juszczyk, should he go sign a deal elsewhere? Should he decide to retire pretty soon? Like, I think it's getting to a point where you need to start preparing for that sooner rather than later. And as good as Kyle Juszczyk is, you have to start preparing for life after him. These guys aren't going to play forever. And I think Okonkwo does a really good job addressing both of those needs. And again, 6'2", 244, being able to move like that, have that kind of vertical. Like, I'm banking on the athletic traits. I want as much competition in the tight end room as possible because I think after George Kittle, nothing should be really guaranteed. Like, to me, I think that's a spot where there needs to be that iron sharpens iron and that, all this competition crap we hear about the quarterback position. I want to see that at tight end. I want to see these tight ends really fighting to become the number 2 and number 3 guys. So I go with the Okonkwo there. That's kind of where I'm at with it. So moving on, the 49ers are picking again, the back end of round 6, pick 220. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, well, we've kind of gone all over the place. We've drafted, trenches on both sides. We've drafted running backs. We've drafted safeties. We've drafted tight ends. Where else do the 49ers really kind of have a need? For me right now, they still have a pretty big hole in the slot where K'Wan Williams had been playing for the last few seasons. He's obviously now with Denver. There's not really a clear-cut path to who the starting corner will be in that nickel role, playing in that slot position. So for me, I'm looking for a guy that can come in and doesn't have to necessarily start day one, but can project as the long-term answer at that slot corner position. So for me, The way the board felt, I was really excited with this pick. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about, actually, because I haven't seen too much discussion going on there. But this is a player who I really like, especially when we're talking about this role that went from a specialized, sub package role to, nickelbacks are essentially a starter in the modern NFL. So I think that's something where, it's okay to prioritize guys who maybe just be or maybe just defined as a slot corner, only relegated to a singular role as a slot corner. That's still a starting position, and it's still really valuable. So for me, with this pick at 220, I went with Chamari Connor, cornerback out of Virginia Tech. Connor played all 13 games this past season at the slot position for Virginia Tech. He had all ACC honorable mention honors this past season. He started every game in 2019 at the slot corner position as well. Really strong tackler in space, really good physical ability. There's been a couple plays where he forced fumbles off pure just raw strength and the point of, just really the point of attack, crashing into these guys who are ball carriers for the other side. So I really like that. He had 5.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks this past season, multiple pass deflections, multiple interceptions. And the cool thing about Connor, too, is that while he may not be the day one starter from the slot in that nickel position, he can offer some day one upside as a guy who can contribute on special teams. He has over 500 special team snaps in his career for Virginia Tech, and I think that that's something that's extremely valuable. You bring this guy in, you give him some time to develop and mold into maybe they're a long-term replacement for a K'Von Williams, a guy who's really comfortable playing that slot position, but he comes in right away and is able to at least get on the field so you're not wasting a roster spot on a completely developmental project. So I really like Connor a lot. I think he's somebody who would be a steal if he was still around in the 6th round, and I'm really high on him. I might do some more in-depth stuff on him going forward because I haven't seen him talked about enough. But he's a guy to keep an eye on. Chamari Connor, guys, Virginia Tech. Remember that name. Watch him. See if you like him. Let me know what you think. This next pick is one of my favorite prospects in the entire draft, which is pretty cool because it's round 6, pick 221. The Niners are picking back-to-back here. I believe they're both compensatory picks, one after the other. This is where it gets interesting for me because we don't know what's really going to happen on the offensive line with Mike McGlinchey. We don't really know if he's going to fully recover. If he does, is he going to be, playing at a level that's going to price himself out of the 49ers plans when he's due for an extension next offseason? What's going on there? So for me, it's time to draft a potential replacement and somebody who's a really athletic tackle who can do all the things you need in that outside zone scheme and also have the ability to anchor and pass protection, hold their own in these gap schemes and stuff. So again, this is one of my favorite players in this entire draft. Round 6, pick 221. I'm going with Spencer Burford, tackle out of University of Texas, San Antonio. I think Burford's a guy who has all the traits that you could ask for and somebody that would develop into a starter for this 49ers offense and the way they like to attack defenses. He's a guy whose film I really liked. He was playing in he's playing Conference USA, so the level of competition is something that's always going to get brought up with players like this. But he dominated it stretches during this, and that's what I want to see when you're talking about guys maybe not playing in those Power 5 conferences. He was first team All-Conference USA during this past season, and he only allowed 1 sack on 338 pass blocking snaps this past season. So for me, he's a guy who, again, offers that athletic upside, and you have the ability of maybe not rushing him in to play right away and having to, meet the needs of being ready to go by week 1 his rookie year. He can develop, make sure that his game speed is up to par with what he's going to need at the NFL level. And you have the chance to learn from a guy like Trent Williams. And I actually got to talk to Spencer at the Combine, and I asked him what it would mean to play with a player like Trent Williams. And the look on his face, man, he was so thrilled at just the thought of it, and mentioned a bunch of times about how good it would be and how cool it would be to learn from a player like Trent Williams and be able to have that role model in the locker room day in and day out. So Burford's a guy who I really like. I think that he is somebody who would be an absolute steal at this point. So he's the guy that I like there. Again, one of my favorite players in the draft. I'll do a little bit more stuff on Connor and Burford and some of these late round guys at a later time, because I understand that people are a little bit more invested in where they're going at, the second and third round picks. But again, remember that name. Spencer Burford is a player I really like. And hey, a third of the league is basically running some variation of Kyle's offense. So if the 49ers don't end up taking him, another team will. And I think they're going to be very lucky. Jamal, I don't know if you missed it, but I'm going to go back and flash it just in case while I see you still in here. This was my pick at 187. So I don't know if you were here for that, but I wanted to give you a shout out for pointing it out earlier. So shout out to you, my guy. Those Maryland guys are running like crazy over there. So we have one more pick left in this draft, right? And it's Mr. Irrelevant. The 49ers get the honor or the joy or the burden, however you want to look at it, of taking the last player in this draft. So for me, it got to a point where a lot of the guys that I've actually extensively watched and looked at were off the board. And I'm kind of just looking at, hey, where's a guy that I can, where's a position that I can take a guy and add a little bit of competition, add a little bit of, depth, insulation, whatever you want to call it, to the room. So I came back to the tight end position. I still think the tight end position is something where you need to take as many swings as possible to find somebody who can be an impact player behind Kittle, behind Dwelly, or behind Warner, however this shakes out. I'd like to see more depth at tight end. So I took one more with the last pick in the draft. At round 7, pick 262, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, I went with Lucas Krull, tight end out of Pittsburgh. Krull, to me, is just a guy who he has prototypical size at the position. He's 6'6", 260, was a pretty solid receiver in that Pittsburgh passing attack. He caught 38 passes for 451 yards and 6 touchdowns this past season. Was a reliable target for Kenny Pickett in that offense. And again, it's just a guy where you're in the 7th round at this point. Like I'm looking at traits, and I'm looking at guys who I think could potentially contribute at some point and offer some kind of value. And even if it's just him pushing the other tight ends into competition, like for me at that point, like the value's okay. You're not going to draft, the odds of you drafting a, perennial starter at pick 262 are pretty slim. I like the depth that a player like Krull could add. Another cool fact about Krull is that if this were to actually happen, this would be the second time that he was drafted by a professional sports team from San Francisco. He was drafted in the 34th round of the 2018 MLB draft by the San Francisco Giants. So I thought that was a cool little, piece of info that he had already had some ties to being drafted to the San Francisco area at one point in his career. So that's my mock. And for those of you who are just joining, I'll go through it real quick one more time, so that everybody can see where these guys were picked and what my, thought process was. I'll also drop the article link in the comments if you guys wanted to read that. So just to rehash really quickly, round 2, I went with Josh Paschal, edge, Kentucky. Round 3, I went with Nick Cross, safety out of Maryland. Round 3, 105, I went with Dohnovan West, center, Arizona State. Round 4, I went with Otito Ogbonnia from UCLA. Round 5, I went with Hassan Haskins, running back out of Michigan. Round 6, I went with Chigozium Okonkwo from Maryland. Round 6, pick 220, I went with Chamari Connor, cornerback, Virginia Tech. 221, Spencer Burford, tackle, University of Texas, San Antonio. And then finally, Mr. Irrelevant, 262, Lucas Krull, tight end, Pittsburgh. So that's the first official mock that I've published. I've done a couple, mocks I've thrown on Twitter and stuff like that. I have to do better about making sure the numbers all add up, because I'm going to be on like 5.4 and mock 7.3 and all these things. I did a couple on Twitter that were a joke. Like I posted one that was just like all quarterbacks when I was goofing around one night at like midnight or something like that. But I'm going to try to be better about keeping them in chronological order. So if you guys do want to come back to a reference point, maybe I hit on a couple of these guys. I don't know. Last year I hit on 2 players in my final mock. I had Trey Lance and I had Diamador Lenore go to the 49ers in the slots that they were actually picked. Other than that, I missed on every single other pick. So I'm not expecting to, be perfect doing this, but maybe one of these guys, 2 of these guys ends up on the 49ers. It might be cool to have a reference point to fall back on. If you guys want to ever come back and watch them for your own reference, I want to have it in order. So basically what I'm saying is for the videos, this will be 1.0. The next one I do will be 2.0. I'm going to try to do a couple per week. I have some really, really good stuff lined up for you guys for voices other than my own for some draft content. I have a couple people who are really good writers for a couple scouting outlets who have told me that when they have some free time, we're going to link together and they're going to come on and give me their thoughts on some 49er-centric players. So before that happens, I'll poll you guys a little bit, ask you who are some prospects you really like. Maybe we'll open the floor a little bit during, and you can ask these guys who are devoting their time 24/7 to scouting these prospects coming out, what your thoughts are for picks for the 49ers. So we're transitioning into mock draft season. You know, it's going to be a fun few weeks. I'm still trying to do streams every day. So we're going to have a couple of these a week, at least be mock draft related, draft centric, prospect centric. We'll talk about a few specific things, but get ready for that. I know in the coming days, I will have somebody on doing draft stuff. And then next week, I will have a few people lined up who are really, really sound with their draft analysis and their understanding of prospects. So that's it for the mock. I don't know if you guys have any questions, comments about it, any concerns. I'm sure the first one I'll get is no receivers. To be honest, the way the board went, there weren't really receivers that I liked, and I wanted to spend picks on guys that I actually thought would make the roster. And I just think that the undrafted free agent pool and the pool of veterans who are still available, the odds of one of them making an impact on this team were greater to me than picking a guy that I saw left on the board at the back end of round 6 or in round 7. So I understand wide receiver is a spot where they might address it in the draft, and I didn't. Again, I was just going based on how the board fell and how I felt players would impact this team moving forward. So that's the one I'll probably get the most, I'm sure. If I go back and scroll through the comments, I'm sure there's something about receiver not being taken. I get it. Again, this is just my whole theory. I'm not going to reach on a guy or just take a receiver just to take him. I try to stand by the picks that I make and give some sort of semblance into my logic, even if you disagree with the pick, where you can understand why I made the pick. So I'm sure the next mock I do, if the board falls a little differently, there's a receiver I might take. It's really tempting in that 93, 105 range. Khalil Shakir, Romeo Dubs, like a couple of those guys I really, really like. So I'm, sure it'll change the next time around, and maybe I can justify taking one of those guys there. But to me, coming away with Nick Cross and coming away with the Dohnovan West was more appealing, knowing that the Niners have a Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and a Juwan Jennings and a Ray McLeod and a level of depth at that position that I think is enough that I'm not overly concerned about reaching for one. So again, that's kind of my thinking with receivers. So we'll circle back, and I'm sure there'll be a chance for me to maybe take one the next time. And we'll see how it goes again for the next one. So right now, again, if you guys have any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer. I see there's a couple I'll try to get to, but that's it for the mock portion of this. That's kind of where my thinking is. So again, let me know what you think. Justin's upset Sean Jolly isn't even on the PFF big board. Well, see, this is the problem. PFF has a lot of players that are missing that I like as well, but it's more accurate than the PFN one, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like when I see Sky Moore going and pick 105, I'm like, okay, this isn't, I don't want to sit here and have to purposely pass on players because for whatever reason this draft database has a guy who's going within the top 40 picks at pick 110, and I saw that too much with the PFN one. The same thing happened last year. So for me personally, I'm just kind of like, I'm not the biggest advocate for PFF, but I do think that their mock draft tool is pretty good. So that's why I personally stay with it. BSC says this is just a weird draft. It's not deep, but full of elite talent. It's deep, but not full of elite talent. Sorry, I had that mixed up. Yes, I agree. I think this is where, again, you can get impact, depth pieces, and the 49ers are in a spot too where they have elite talent. Like they're not starved for these game-changing elite players. Like they have them up and down the roster. They really just need to solidify a few holes here and there and really insulate that roster with some more quality players. And I think this is the perfect draft to do so. It could be coincidence. It could just be how things ended up shaking out, but maybe the 49ers scouting department deserves a round of applause for the foresight they had to be willing to give up a couple years worth of first round picks. I think next year's draft might make this statement not necessarily 100% true because I think it's a little bit deeper, but just based on where we're at now, if you're going to have a draft where you don't have a first round pick, I think this is the best one in years to be without a first round pick because I think there is so much quality depth and quality players that can develop into starters in that second, third, even early fourth round. And you're not as dependent on having that top 32 pick and having that pick in that first round. Like, I think this is a really good time to do it. Next year's draft is going to be pretty good, especially at the top. The quarterbacks will be better. I think the draft as a whole will be better. So maybe that statement doesn't ring as true next year, but I do wonder if that did factor into the 49ers decision to part with their first round pick this season, knowing that the draft wasn't going to be as highly touted as some in recent memory. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Hendricks is asking, will the Brady rumors stir up again with Bruce stepping down? Bruce being Bruce Arians, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach. For those of you guys who don't know, Bruce Arians is retiring and stepping into a role with the Buccaneers front office. Todd Bowles, who I am a big fan of and I think has deserved a head coaching job since the day he got fired from New York pretty much, is now stepping in to be the head coach of that Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. I'm thrilled for Todd Bowles. I think he's just fantastic. What he was able to do with Jets organization that had struggled mightily and not really the strongest roster, I thought was really impressive. Last double-digit win season for the Jets. I did not understand why he was fired, and I never could just rationalize how that would happen. So I'm a big fan of Todd Bowles getting a chance with another chance with a quality team. I don't want to say another chance with another quality team because I don't think he had that the first time. Hendricks is asking, will the Brady rumors stir up again with Bruce stepping down? I don't think so. Well, I shouldn't say that. The Brady rumors will be there regardless. Like, people are going to talk about Tom Brady no matter what. But the reality of it is, I don't think that changes him being retired. I don't think that it changes the fact that he's probably not going to play for the 49ers. I don't think that it changes the fact that Bruce Arians retiring, I don't think changes that. I don't think that anything really is different here other than the fact that Todd Bowles is now the head coach. Like, they're still going to run the same offense. Byron Leftwich is still the offensive coordinator. The plan hasn't really changed. And, there were reports that Bruce Arians and Tom Brady weren't getting along too well. I don't know if they're true or not. I'm not going to speculate too much on things that I don't know, but I'm just throwing it out there that it has been reported that there was kind of some friction there. So I think, honestly, if anything, this makes it more likely Brady does stay and that Brady isn't having some power move to try to go elsewhere. So I don't think that it's going to be too much of an issue when it comes to that. BSE is saying they traded up because the QB class this year is straight Chiefs. I mean, hey, I'm not a big fan of any of these guys really, other than I like Malik Willis. I think Desmond Ridder can be a decent quarterback too, but it's nobody that I would bank the future of my franchise or my job as a general manager on if I was making the picks. I really like Willis. I think Willis has he'll step into the NFL right away and have a top 5 arm in the league from day one. Obviously that's not everything when it comes to playing quarterback, but I do think that his physical traits are really cool and really good. And if he's able to get into an organization that's going to be patient and develop him properly, I think he can be a really special player. I got to see him throw up close at the combine. Even just watching him, dude, he was thrown in the hallway at the convention center in Indiana, and the way the ball comes out of his hand, it's like when you watch a pitcher warming up in baseball and you hear the pop of the mitt when he's thrown to a catcher. It's different for some guys, and for Malik Willis, it sounded different and it felt different. So I think he's going to be a pretty special player. But I agree. I think the QB class this year isn't all that great, and I think that Lalo says this year's draft has off-duty firefighters as QBs. Unserious draft class. Hey, some of these guys may surprise us, but to me, it feels kind of like that 2013 draft when it comes to quarterbacks. I don't really see anybody that's jumping off the board in my eyes. I don't really see anybody that's really moving the needle too much for me personally. So I kind of agree there. But it's kind of where we're at. So we're coming up on 45 minutes. I'm done with the mock draft portion of this. There's not really much else I was going to touch on today. If you guys have any more questions, please let me know in the meantime. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. And then, I'll be back again tomorrow with something cool, hopefully some different things to talk about. I know what I'm going to try to do too is parlay some of the stuff I do for my articles that go out in the morning for Niners Nation and then do videos on them in the evening so I can expand a bit more, talk a little bit more about it. And I understand some people just don't want to sit there and read articles. They'd rather have a video or something they can listen to. So I think the plan as of now is I'm going to write a little bit about the 49ers defensive line rotation, where I think guys are going to fit in, why I think that unit is still going to be the engine of that defense and be a big factor into why I think they will be very competitive this year. So that's probably what I'll come back to talk about tomorrow. Real quick, I will say this. I'm a diehard Warriors fan. My thoughts on them right now are pretty much I don't want to make the injuries excuse because a lot of teams are hurt, but I'm just not rushing to judgment with the Warriors because I think we got to see such a limited sample size of them all healthy at the same time. And, when the game that really sold me on it when everybody was on the court together was that game against Milwaukee a couple weeks ago where I'm like, okay, like this team, they can make some noise if they get in the playoffs. We just really need to see what happens with Steph, and Wiggins needs to make his free throws, man. I'm a big Andrew Wiggins guy. I'm a big Andrew Wiggins defender. I don't know what the hell happened to him after the All-Star break, but I hope that for his sake, he ends up figuring it out because I think it's a bummer that he gets dragged as much as he does. He's a really good two-way player. He's a really good defender. He gives the 49ers. He gives the Warriors really good length on the wings. So I hope they can figure it out. It's going to be tough though, man. Like they're playing Phoenix right now. They're down 2 at the half. Phoenix is a really, really good team. Memphis is a really, really good team. I still think playing teams like the Clippers and the Nuggets are going to be really hard. And as much as people may laugh at me, like if the Lakers find a way to get in the play-in and Anthony Davis and LeBron are healthy, I still think they're a tough team to beat in 7 games, even though they've obviously had their struggles this season. I wouldn't be eager to play them as well. So it's going to be an uphill battle no matter who the Warriors play. I just think that at this point, I need to see what happens when everybody's healthy. And if that doesn't happen this year, it wouldn't surprise me because they started out so strong and they've just kind of fallen off since then. But we've seen flashes. Clay's minutes are going up. Clay looks more comfortable. I think if we can see Draymond at 100% by the time the playoffs come around, it's a different story. It's really just ultimately what happens to Steph. Steph is just so important to this team, and it's so funny some of the hate that I see this guy get over the years. He's just such a good player. So we'll see. The Lakers are back in the 10 spot. Hey, man, if the Lakers win the play-in, I could see them getting in and giving a team a hard time. I'm not saying that I think they're going to win the title or they're going to go on this miraculous run, but if they're healthy, beating Anthony Davis and LeBron James in the same series 4 times, it's difficult. It's going to be a task. It's not going to be this cakewalk that I think a lot of people think it will. So I wouldn't want to have to play them if I was the Warriors. So maybe we'll get into some basketball stuff when the playoffs go around. I know not every 49ers fan is a Warriors fan, so we can talk about who your guys' teams are, what your outlook is on them, what you guys think about the playoffs. Maybe I'll do a stream that's just basketball stuff if you guys want to talk about that, or we can leave it open to talk about some basketball stuff. But for now, I'm going to try to keep it to, as much 49ers related content as possible. I'm going to keep doing mock draft. I'm going to try to do a couple per week. So again, today was the first one. If you're just tuning in now, if you go back to the beginning, we went through each pick the 49ers currently have. I believe there's 9 off the top of my head. I apologize if I'm wrong with that number, but that's where I'm at now. Tony, thank you so much for coming by, dude. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone, even if you didn't agree with the picks, you could understand why my logic was the way it was and why I was at the picks, why I had the picks that I did and all that stuff. So we'll have some fun with it. And I'm going to do one too that's going to be a bit more interactive. I'll give some heads up for that for when I plan on doing that. We can do something where maybe we can have some sort of time limit in the chat where we'll have a certain amount of players available and the most, picked name within the chat within a 30-second time frame, something along those lines. We'll go ahead and we'll do a mock draft that's just from the chat of this channel. I think that'd be really fun to give you guys one, and we can compare how it looks versus the experts, versus mine, versus, other people on 49ers Twitter. We can have some fun with this. So, again, thank you to everybody who came in and tuned in. I really appreciate it. I'll get to a couple of these last questions. If you guys have any more while I'm still here in front of my computer, I'm happy to answer them. Again, for those just joining, I'm trying to get everything set up and put together. I have my backdrop again, finally. I've had to unbox a few things at my place. So it feels good to be back in this mindset where I'm back to where I was streaming at before, for those of you who ever watched my stuff before I started this channel. Hendricks is asking who wins round 3 between Duke and UNC. It's so hard to count out Duke. Like, they have such good top end talent. Coach K is obviously, on the way out, and I know he wants to go out on top. Paolo is just incredible. I am rooting for UNC though, for my guy Billy out there from the Panthers world. Billy M. If you guys have seen on Twitter, he's a big UNC guy, so I'm pulling for him. I know he's been going through the motions with this tournament run, so I want to see them win. I think that I'm just I'm not admittedly the best with college basketball this year. My college basketball team is Michigan State, so I was a little deflated when Duke beat them. So at this point, if I was betting on it, which I might. I'm not ruling it out. If I was betting on it, though, I would take Duke, but I'm rooting for UNC. I'd like to see UNC. I always root for underdogs when March Madness comes around. It's not fun rooting for favorites and 1 seeds, man. Nobody wants to see that. But even though UNC is like a blue blood program, they've been around a bunch. I guess I'm rooting for them at this point. I was riding that St. Peter's wave for a while, but I knew it was going to end eventually. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and we'll see how it goes. It should be fun. Oh, Dawes, that's a good one. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and cut it off then, unless you guys have any other questions. Thank you to everybody who stopped by and watched the mock draft. I kind of did it last minute because I've been running around and doing a bunch of stuff today. But again, I'm going to real quick, Hendrix is talking about Brad manifesting Burns. I saw an article on heavy.com that had like 100,000 views or something on it that had Brad's tweets and stuff in it. So keep supporting the boy, man. Keep giving him love and keep giving him all the support as he works tirelessly to make Brian Burns to San Francisco happen on his own. So thank you guys again for coming by. I'm going to do something again tomorrow. I think tomorrow I'm going to talk about the defensive line, where I think they're at, where I think, the Kerry Hyder signing ranks, what I think about Javon Kinlaw and how he projects, and why I think the 49ers defensive line is still a unit to be reckoned with. So everybody, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching the mock draft. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I appreciate any support as I get this going. And just you guys have a great night. Lalo, thank you so much for coming by as always, dude. Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody in the chat. And you